So I'm going to get started because it's already 2 minutes after the hour, and I want to be respectful of your time because we do end on time. So, and I want to be respectful of our guests as well, that she has, you see me pausing a little bit is because I'm letting people in like right now. But let me begin with this is, we're coming back from a wonderful annual conference that I think most of you attended. And I want to thank the steering committee, Carrie Cantrell, who, as you know, led this conference, Michael Lugardo, Anita Porco, James Garcia, Alexis Sanchez. Then included in that, we had in that team was Joanne Dorn, Callie Piacente, who's with us here. Lori, you're with us here, Opiala, and Diane Woolish. The reason why this conference was a very good one was the fact that we all really put a lot of time into it prior. It was months before, and we really thought this out. And there was some great recommendations from the different members of the steering committee. And then we implemented that. And I believe, just given the surveys and given people that have come up to me and the team, that this was a very valuable conference. In addition to that, all of you got to connect with people that you hadn't connected in the past couple of years in person, perhaps on the phone or Zoom meetings. So that was good. And we really thought out very well who the speakers were going to be. So we're hoping that next year we can go ahead and top that. And we promise that it'll be even better, considering that we're going into our 75th anniversary. So that's a big, important part about next year as well. And we'll be casting out a net to the affiliate network and to the board of trustees, whoever wants to join the 75th anniversary committee. So that's going to be super important for us. But just to let you know, I've been sharing this with different committees and with the board. One second, I need somebody in here. With the board is that given that we had the original dates that we had for our conference next year were in May, and we went through the whole process, and I signed the agreement on time and all that. And then the hotel came back in Orlando and said that those dates were not available after they had told us that they were. So we scrambled, we found some dates, but those dates that we confirmed coincide with the ANCOR's 2024 National Conference. But I've already been in contact with Barbara Merle, the CEO, and we're going to work together with messaging how we can actually promote both conferences. And perhaps I'm also speaking with James Garcia, and also I had a conversation with Sean Luchtefeld from ANCOR to see how perhaps maybe we can co-present and stream in a particular presentation, what that may look like, how that collaboration may turn out to be or roll out. That's something that we need to figure out, but we can maybe stream something during both conferences. So we are working on that. And I think it'll bring both organizations a lot closer. Another notable thing is that on May 8th, this past Monday, the Board of Trustees approved a 3-year strategic plan. And that strategic plan really had a lot of input from the board, from our team, but especially from the affiliates. And all of you know the conversations that we had from September 30th, the virtual conversations. In addition to that, we had the surveys. In addition to that, most of you were here in Phoenix, Arizona for the summit. And we had additional conversations. And once that happened, then we had sent out another survey to go ahead and prioritize the 4 goals. And the 4 goals are, just as a reminder, because that whole report and the detailed report of the strategic plan was in your members of the corporation book, was number 1 was branding and awareness. The UC brand is refreshed, considering the diversity of affiliates, structure, operations, population served, and the services they provide. Number 2, funding. Additional funding is secured through expanded relationships to assure UCP and the network's sustainability. Number 3, advocacy. UCP will be viewed as a leader in advocacy for people with disabilities and their families. Number 4, affiliate growth, support. The UCP affiliate network is expanded, strengthened, and supported. So during this particular opportunity that we have in the space that we have to go ahead and execute these 4 goals, I'm in dialogue with the board and with the finance committee to make sure that we have the appropriate funding so that we can execute these goals. So how I'm going to do that and the team is that each of these goals have tactics and milestones. So then in the tactics and milestones, I'll be presenting to the finance committee and to the board members exactly what we need to accomplish these and what impact, what investment we need from finance and from our funds that we have in reserves. So it's an exciting time for us. I'm really happy that we've kind of walked together to get to this point. But then I've heard very clear from all of you, and I've heard that, Armando, we've been here before 15 years ago. Are we really going to execute this? And I'm saying yes. I'm very confident that we can. So with that said, any questions for me before I introduce our guest speaker? Anything that perhaps I've shared here that you wanted to get some more information or something that I didn't share? Okay, so with that, I didn't hearing nothing out there, or I didn't see any hands raised up or anything like that. Then I'm really excited to introduce our speaker. Thanks to Diane Willish. She had sent me a note and had sent me a interview that it was a national interview that Steph Roach had. And it was with one of the national networks where she had connected with a young lady also that had disabilities. And because of that, I was very moved. Second, which was a great coincidence, or I'll call it a blessing, is that Steph lives in the same city that I do. So we had a chance to have breakfast. And it was a wonderful breakfast where we just got to know each other, kind of engage. And I love, Steph, that everybody that came to you, you asked for their name and said, what is your name? And thank you for your service here. And that was a great, one of many great things that you shared. Steph is an entrepreneur. She's an author. She actually was very kind and she gave me her book, Driven, and that's her right here. Mm-hmm. So I was very grateful that she gave me the book. She's a coach. She's an adaptive athlete. She's a wife living with cerebral palsy. Steph has been a trailblazer over the past 12 years for adaptive athletic community and etched her name into the history books, becoming the world's first female as a CrossFit trainer living with cerebral palsy. And there's a whole lot more here, but I'll have her share her story. She definitely knows about United Cerebral Palsy. She was excited about that she has an opportunity to speak with all of you. And with that said, I'm honored and blessed to have Steph Roach with us. So Steph, I'll turn it over to you and welcome to the quarterly UCP CEO Town Hall.
This is so exciting. Thank you so much for having me. I know that these kinds of meetings can sometimes be a little boring, so I promise to not bore you. And I hope that you can get a lot of information from me. And at the end, if there's any questions, I love to kind of have a relaxed conversation, especially when it comes to people that understand cerebral palsy and understand that CP is a spectrum. So I'll start with the fact that I was born with what I like to call a mild case of spastic cerebral palsy. So the way that my CP presents itself, we like to say that I'm kind of like a CP unicorn in the sense that I use almost every accessibility device you could think of on the planet to be able to move from one place to the next and to be as independent as possible. So in any given day, I will walk around with crutches, I will use a power chair, and I will even train in a manual chair, just depending on the day or how I feel. It's actually really fun to be part of a group of people that truly understand what working with somebody with CP is like. There's a lot of misconceptions that the world has about cerebral palsy. So I feel like I've spent my entire life, even though I'm very young, I'm 33 years old, I've spent my entire life kind of changing people's perception of what it means to be living with CP. And I'm really honored to be here today. So thank you so much for your time. So growing up, I grew up in a family full of able-bodied people. And I actually am born a twin. So my twin brother is completely able-bodied. He's a lot taller than me, a little bit bigger than me. But when we were going through elementary school, high school, middle school, he was really my driving force to wanting to be as independent as possible, because we had a lot of the same friends. Our friend group everybody was pretty much able-bodied. I spent probably from elementary school all the way through high school being the only one in my school district to have a physical disability. So that was a really kind of a life-changing, shaping experience for me, because I was constantly having to come up with my own playbook for a lot of things. And when it was going through school, people always asked me like if I was bullied or if I had a big issue. And quite honestly, socially, I never really had an issue. I had incredible friends. But one of the biggest issues for me was actually the adults, because the adults would think that they knew exactly what I needed as the individual with CP, but they weren't really asking me. So at a very early age in education, I was able to sit in on my own IEP meetings and really start to learn the importance of advocating for yourself. And I think there was a really big turning point when I was in like middle school, high school, and they didn't have an adaptive physical education program at all. And so for, I don't know, I'd say like the first like 6 months of middle school, I started getting frustrated because anytime that we would go to like a physical education class, they would be like, oh, Steph, you just play with this ball in the corner with one of your friends, and that'll be that. And I started to get kind of frustrated because I'm like, I can do what everybody else is doing. I just need to be able to adapt it, but I also need people to be willing to have an open mind about adapting. And I did have one physical education teacher that said to me, why don't you show me the ropes? Why don't we create this together? And we started to create a curriculum for movement and accessibility so that I could be part of the classes. And that's when things started to really click for me, that advocacy was so important and advocating for yourself was important. There were a lot of things that people had said to my parents and my family members about what it was going to be like growing up with, CP and living this life. And year after year, I would kind of knock these perceptions down. One of the biggest things that people were worried about was, is she going to go to college? Is she going to like have a job and, be able to live this normal life? And I remember my mom would always tell people when I was 3 years old, I wasn't moving the same as everybody else, but I sure as heck had a really big mouth. And that big mouth was going to get me from point A to point B with no problem with whatever I needed. And that was really true because I always stood up for myself. I stood up for people around me, but I always had to constantly feel like I was proving myself. And I remember at the end of high school, people were really worried about, where are you going to get placed for school? And I decided that I was not only going to go away to college, but I was going to go to a completely different state. I grew up in New York State. Everyone expected me to go to school local to home. And I decided to go to school in Boca Raton, Florida. And I went to Lynn University in Boca Raton, had the absolute blast and best years of my life. Most people would think that college were the best years of your life because parties and all this fun stuff. I was kind of the opposite, and I was very much involved in school and activities and creating activities. From a very early age, like I've said, I've always been very creative and wanting a place to be able to fit in. And when you're constantly having to go against the grain, when you start creating your own programs and creating things that work best for you and the people around you that are like you, it starts creating real momentum. And so when I was in college, I had the opportunity to create disability awareness type of events. And I can say, even to this day, they still do some of those events. So we did things like a day in a wheelchair, different abilities dinner, so that people understood kind of the perception of what it was like to live in this type of body. I'm kind of going a little bit fast because I have a very big story, but I would say that those were really the formative years of me being an advocate and being as loud and as proud as I am. In 2012, I fell in love with fitness and CrossFit, and I realized I was the only one in the world doing what I was doing at the time. There were so many other types of adaptive athletes, right? You have people that are quadriplegic, paraplegic, you have people that have different limb differences, but there was nobody with CP doing what I was doing. And so I remember going into a CrossFit gym and saying, I want to do that, but I don't necessarily know how. And the cool thing was my trainers at the time didn't really know how to either, but they were willing to try to learn, right? And in my book, I talk about this concept of chasing the yes. You can chase the no all you want, but are you going to be prepared when somebody says yes to you, right? We prepare our entire life for failure, but we never truly prepare ourselves for success, right? And so that was a really big turning point for me when somebody said, yes, let's try this. I don't know how this is going to work, but let's try it out. And when I got into my first CrossFit workout and I fell in love with the idea of it, I spent about a year perfecting myself as an athlete. And then I went to a CrossFit gym in Virginia, and I had an adaptive athlete friend of mine. He was an amputee and he was coaching a class. I didn't mean to be rude at all, but I looked at him and I said, Jason, do those people really listen to you? And he said, of course they listen to me. And I said, do you think they would listen to me? He said, yeah, of course they would listen to you. As long as you learn your craft and you show them what you can do, of course they're going to listen to you. Now, remember, this whole sport is predominantly able-bodied people. So again, I'm having to not only prove to everybody around me that I can do this, but I'm having to prove to myself that I'm starting from scratch and going to be building this new playbook. And in 2013, I lost you guys. In 2013, I decided to go after my certification in CrossFit, and I actually failed my first test, and I was heartbroken. I really thought I wouldn't be able to do this. This is something that's going to knock me on my butt, not going to be able to do it. And my friend said to me, we're going to study it again and we're going to keep going and you're going to try it. And about 6 months later, I tried it again and I passed my test. Now, there was a difference as to why I passed. In the beginning, when I first took the test, I was regurgitating information that people were telling me would be on the test or just how to coach something. But when I started coaching in my own style and I started kind of creating my own narrative of what it meant to be a coach, it didn't really look like what everybody else looks like, but it made sense for me. And once I started really creating my own sense of what it meant to be a coach, then it really clicked for me. And in 2013, like Armando said, I became the world's first CrossFit trainer with cerebral palsy to have a level 2 certification. all that stuff is awesome. And it's such a great accomplishment. But to me, it was, again, setting that example for people like me. I get messages from people all over the world saying, hey, I have a little girl with CP, and I never realized that she could do functional fitness. I never realized that she could, do all of these intense activities, because intensity is relative. So what's going to be intense for Armando might not be intense for somebody else, and vice versa. So when I started getting all these messages from people around the world, I started realizing that it was important to really start using my experiences and trying to create a platform. Luckily for me, social media really became a thing, and I started filming myself, and it wasn't for a point of vanity, but it was for a point of reaching that person in China or Australia or England or Florida with cerebral palsy and saying, you guys can do this too, right? And that's when Armando was talking about that little girl when we were able to be on CBS. I mean, that was like lightning in a bottle. This little girl reminds me so much of myself. It's kind of like looking into the past while she's looking at the future. And that was insane and crazy to think about. But the fact that I have the ability to create such an imprint on people, whether they're living with cerebral palsy or they're knowing someone with CP or they're raising someone with CP. I think when you think of the term cerebral palsy and then you Google it, have you ever heard a doctor say, don't Google something? Because the worst side of something is going to come out on Google. And unfortunately, when you Google cerebral palsy, and this is what I've been really working to change, is that the imagery doesn't always match people's reality, right? Just because somebody uses an accessibility device, whether it be a speaking device, a movement device, it doesn't make them any less than. And that's kind of where I've tried to really hone my craft and to prove to people, hey, we're way more than just a at birth diagnosis or shortly after birth. If CP wasn't enough, I, in 2016, was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 3B. So my husband likes to joke that CP was a little too easy for me. So the universe said, let's challenge her with something new. And I was the first patient my doctor had ever worked with cerebral palsy. And as soon as she told me that, I automatically went into learning experience mode. And we took as many notes. I had about 300 pages worth of notes and experiences just from how chemotherapy was affecting me as a person living with cerebral palsy, because they weren't really sure how the two were going to coexist. I will tell you that I don't think either one of them had anything to do with one another, but I will say that my passion and drive and ability to be physically fit definitely helped save my life. For as active as I was technically cancer-free in about 7.5 weeks. I still had to go through 6 months of chemotherapy and a lot of different hormone treatments, but I was cancer-free in about 7.5 weeks. And I remember the doctor saying to me, I've never seen anything like you in my life. Just keep doing what you're doing. Because if you take care of your body's going to take care of you, right? And so I am now almost 7 years removed from my cancer diagnosis, and I am healthy and I am cancer-free, which I'm very, very grateful for the ability to do. But, once you finish cancer, you got to go on to the next challenge, right? So naturally, my husband says to me, what do you want to do after cancer? And I said, I think a really good idea is going to be opening a gym. He's like, okay, let's open a gym. So we opened a gym in North Carolina. I opened a CrossFit gym, but my ultimate goal was not to be the CrossFit gym owner for the most competitive athlete. my ultimate goal was to create a space for what I like to call the misfit toys. Whether you're, in your 60s and you just want to be the best grandma that you can be, or you're a mom of 5 kids, or you have any sort of physical disability. It was the most magical 5,000 square foot experience that I could ever hope for. Personally, it was a wonderful learning experience, because if you've ever owned a brick and mortar space at all, it was a very expensive learning experience. It was very challenging, and it necessarily was not the most successful financially, but at the end of the day, I was really proud with what we had done. But I had opened the gym for about 2 years, and it was moving along and hopefully going to start growing. And then more challenges. The whole world turned upside down. And in 2020, we had to close our doors. And at first, they had said it was going to be 2 weeks. Then it was another 2 weeks. And then it happened to be 3 months. And my husband and I looked at each other. And on the wall of our gym, underneath our logo, it said, "Stay driven." And he looked at the wall and he looked at me and he said, "Well, how are we going to stay driven?" And I said, "I'm not really sure, but a lot of people are talking about this Zoom thing. Like, maybe we should try it out." So I needed to keep my members coming back, and they were obviously paying me for an experience. So we tried this virtual gym idea, and it worked. And I was like, oh my God, people are really coming back for this. And then all of a sudden I opened it up to an organization. It's called the Initiative for Women with Disabilities, out of NYU Hospital. It was kind of a favor for my grandma at the time. And she had said, "Hey, I see that you're teaching these classes and they seem to be going very well. These women with disabilities can't go anywhere right now. They don't have transportation. The world is shut down, but they still want to do some sort of activity." And I'm like, "Sure, Grandma, like, I'll do whatever you want me to do." Well, little did I know, 30 to 40 women were logging on every Wednesday and every Friday, and every Wednesday and every Friday. I'm like, this is insane. This is magical. So I sat down with my husband and I said, if we're really closing the doors, why don't we scrap hammer-driven fitness? That's what my gym was called. And let's start staying driven. He's like, "I think that's a really cool idea." So that's exactly what we did. And we shut down the gym, closed that all up, and I opened up Zoom. I paid for a Zoom account, and I set a schedule, and all of a sudden people started logging on every single day. That was March of 2020. And to this day, I teach 30 classes a week over Zoom. Every single one of my classes is structured with a coach. I have 5 other coaches that work for me from all over the world. I have one coach who is actually in Canada, which is awesome. And I have a bunch of other coaches all over the place. But some of my coaches actually have disabilities themselves. And you would never normally see that in an everyday gym. And it's so empowering to see people going from, "Man, I can barely lift this cup up," to, "Hey, Coach Steph, I just used 20 pounds to go from here to overhead, and I feel incredible." Now, it has nothing to do with fitness for me. Yes, I love fitness and I love being competitive, and that's just my personal nature. But when somebody tells you, "Hey, Coach Steph, I feel like I have better balance. Hey, Coach Steph, guess what? I can do laundry all by myself." These are real world things that people doing every single day. And I get to have a front row seat to, "Hey, Coach Steph, I did this and I feel so much better because I did this." And so in the last 3 years, the Initiative for Women with Disabilities is called IWD. They went from having free classes to a paying membership. We do individual memberships as well as corporate memberships. I have 7 different corporate memberships that are all based in disability organizations. So that's the one thing that sets us apart is your individual memberships. So if Armando wanted to get a membership or Miss Kelly wanted to get a membership, you don't have to have a disability, right? That's not a requirement for staying driven. I would say about 95% of our population has disabilities, but when it comes to the corporate side, all of my corporate memberships are going to have some sort of disability focus, right? So if United Cerebral Palsy wanted to do a staying driven membership, you guys would pay a certain amount of money a month, and your entire organization would have access to me or one of my staff members for 1 hour, right? So it's all focused to your community and their needs and their experiences. So I will say, going from a gym that was a very expensive learning experience, I will say that I'm very proud of myself because we have been a profitable business since the day we opened. And that's something that was really, really hard to do, and something that at 33 years old, I'm really proud to say that I've done. So I know I talk a lot about myself and I hate really talking about myself because I think it's weird, but I hope it gives you a little bit of insight as to who I am and the passion and the love that I have for what I do. I would love to kind of open it up really quick to some discussion, and don't be afraid. You guys are never going to offend me. Nothing can offend me. This is a space where if I can help educate people, or if I can help just guide people in a better direction, I would rather have an open and honest conversation than say nothing at all. So that's all I got for you guys on my end.
Steph, Armando here. And I know you have a very humble side to you because I did note that when we had breakfast. But tell us about your award that you're going to be receiving in New York.
Okay. So I went, and there might be some people that know about this school and some people that don't, and it's okay if you don't. I went to a school called the Henry Viscardi School from 1993 to 1995. I was 3 years old until I was 5. So I was a student there, and I decided to mainstream my first summer of first grade. So my parents had asked me, hey, do you want to stay in this school or would you like to mainstream? They gave me that power to really make that decision for myself. And I decided to mainstream. But that school has always been a really big part of my foundation and the people that have been there before or have been part of my life. So this year I got asked if I would be willing to accept, the Roy Campanella Award at their sports night event. And I'm going to be awarded alongside Mr. Islander himself, Bobby Nystrom from the New York Islanders, which will be really cool. My husband's a huge hockey fan, so that kind of gave me some brownie points. But yeah, it's going to be a really, really wonderful experience. And for those that did watch the CBS feature, Colby, the little girl that was in the video with me, and her mom and her family, we've all become very close, and she's going to be able to come to the school with me and watch me get the award. So that'll be super fun.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Major congratulations. Any comments, questions for Steph?
There has to be some. I know there has to be. So
I have a question. Hi, Steph. First of all,
hi.
Yeah, congratulations on all the success, including the business. Of course, it's not easy for anyone, and especially doing it in the middle of the pandemic. Starting a business, kudos to you. That's fantastic. I just have a quick question about your. I'm sorry. I have a quick question about your. Are all the people that are providing training are these people all that you've trained, and have you created a kind of specific regimen to train folks in your methods, if that's the right way to put it?
That's a really good question. So, I would say my foundation of my knowledge is based in CrossFit because I've been doing that for about 12 years. So there's no way of really like pulling that out of me. But I will say that over time, we've kind of evolved into our own kind of training method, especially because you're going to have certain people with different mobility experiences or the ability to move. And so what we do is I like to hire from the inside. And so I started out really with one friend of mine who knew what I was doing and had worked with me at my other gym. And then I started working with different corporate organizations, like I mentioned, and I started to just kind of click with certain people. I'm going to use Paul as one of my examples. Paul is a quadriplegic. He's been a quadriplegic for many, many years. He got hurt when he was 17, and he's in his 50s now. And so Paul and I had just really connected, and I had realized that he had a really good passion for commanding a room and teaching. He is a teacher by trade. And so it kind of just works that way. When it comes to mentorship, what we do for coaches, I will not let any of the coaches coach unless they've had at least a month and a half of mentorship under one of us. And making sure that they understand body movement, body mechanics. You don't have to be, an exercise scientist to have to be able to coach one of our classes, but I do want you to at least have some sort of knowledge of the body and making sure, obviously, we want to stay away from injury or further injury. So the other thing that is also important is them, wanting to go better their education. It's not necessarily a requirement, but for them to have some sort of training, understand what it is to coach. Because at one point I can have about 20 people on screen at the same time. And so being able to manage that is something that takes time to learn. I hope that
Very helpful. Yes, very helpful. I'll let, if there's other questions, I'll let them go first.
Hey, Steph, how far do you reach out with your Zoom classes and meetings? Are they just specifically in North Carolina, or do you have?
No. So I live in Arizona. And so I work with NorCal SCI, which is Northern California. I work with Brain Injury Association in North Carolina. I work with the Gesher organization, which is local to Arizona. I have the IWD in New York, and we are starting, cross my fingers, very soon with the Christopher Reeve Foundation.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that works out. So but we're in talks right now with that. So we can really go anywhere that anyone has an internet connection. Some of my athletes are actually from England, Australia, Ireland, and Canada. So we're kind of all over the place.
Okay, thank you.
Steph, when we were in this dialogue at breakfast, I mentioned to you a couple of things of where United Cerebral Palsy is heading to, and that one of the priorities that we have is bringing awareness about who we are, a brand refresh. And you said something about what you thought might be a component that would be good for us to consider. Do you remember when we were talking about that?
Yeah.
And yeah, can you like expand a little bit about that and tell the group here what your thoughts were?
Yeah. So number one, I'm going to preface this with, I don't want to ever make anybody feel like I'm judging them or your website or whatever. I hope to not offend anyone. But when you look at big organizations, especially disability focused, a lot of things that are lacking in the representation is real life experience, right? So normally, like when you go to a website that has something to do with disability resources, it's a lot of the time geared towards parents, right? And this idea of like fixing my kid. Whereas especially with cerebral palsy, it's not necessarily that we have to fix anything, but it's that we live with it, right? And so you should see images and videos of people living life. When people look at me and my husband, he's able-bodied, and we do a lot of things together, and people have this perception that he's like the greatest thing since sliced bread, and he is, don't get me wrong, but people think that just because he's able-bodied, right? And so trust me, we both still bother each other. We're not perfect, but I think having that representation of real life and being able to go out and experience life, like you don't just need to see a kid in a power chair to think, oh, cerebral palsy, because cerebral palsy looks very different, right? You can have somebody that uses crutches. You can have somebody that doesn't use any accessibility devices at all, and they still have CP. So I think just kind of broadening your spectrum, or anyone's spectrum, of what disability looks like, and kind of leading with the empowerment foot rather than the sympathetic foot is really important, right? There's a difference between empathy and sympathy, and having somebody be empowered enough to be empathetic is different than having somebody feel sympathy and then having the recipient feel kind of pitiful. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah. I have this is James again. That's kind of a follow-up question. So, but first of all, also thank you very much for pointing out just that general note that you have about the way people promote, I guess, quote unquote, their services and what they do as associations.
Yeah.
I think that's really a critical thing, and it's good timing for us because we're going through a revamp of our website and want to be thinking about the imagery that we present, et cetera, et cetera. So extremely useful note. I have a separate question though. I've have a long background, really my entire professional career, addressing issues with regards to minority groups, and particularly communities of color and immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
But of recent, because I came to work for United Cerebral Palsy, I somewhere along the way, I forget where I picked up this phrase or just acquired it, that the single largest minority group in this country is probably people with disabilities, just as a whole, right? And one of the things that United Cerebral Palsy has been doing the last couple of 2-3 years has been placing an emphasis on talking about inclusivity and people with disabilities as a vitally critical information, a critical component of what we do and what all disability advocacy groups should also do. But in addition to that, layering on that more awareness about specific challenges that may confront communities of color and or immigrants within the disability community. So along those lines, as an example, we've created a Latinos with Disabilities conference that's coming up. But my question is this, is that when given the broad reach now that you have in the work that you're doing, which is extraordinary work, is that also something that you're conscious of as you reach out to audiences and new members and organizations in terms of your craft and how that impacts diverse communities within the disability community?
This question gets me so hyped up. I love it. Okay, so let's talk the difference between diversity. All right, keep that in your mind. Diversity and adaptation and advocacy are two different things, or three different things. Diversity and advocacy, again, let's say that again, diversity and advocacy are two different things. So diversity might be what you see on the screen right now. Everybody's got different backgrounds. Everybody lives in different places. Everybody looks different. But just because you put somebody who has a Latino background, somebody who has an African-American background, and then somebody in a wheelchair, that is not diversity. All right, and I am very, very passionate about that. Now, if you want to talk about and highlight advocacy, right, and the fact that your organization promotes true advocacy, I love that idea because we advocate every single day for ourselves, right? I'll use this as a perfect example. This happened yesterday, all right? People have this idea of inspiration, right? The term inspiration and oftentimes diversity try to go hand in hand. Now just hear me out before anybody freaks out. All right. Inspiration is one of my most disgusting words. And the reason I say that is because people often use it so much that they forget the meaning of it. Right. And so when you open your website, your ultimate goal is not to create what we call inspiration porn, right? And diversity. Your ultimate goal is to take that diversity, inclusion, and really promote advocacy. So this happened to me yesterday. I went swimming. I go swimming every single day at my local JCC. And this woman saw me. She didn't see me swimming. She didn't see me do anything. She saw me get from the pool, walk up the ramp, and then get into my wheelchair. And she says to me, you know, just watching you walk like that just makes me want to get on the treadmill right now. Like, you've inspired me to just go get on the treadmill. And I'm like, the hell did I do? I didn't do anything. Like, I literally am just moving from point A to point B, right? And I think this idea that people will just place certain figures, certain colors, certain objects together in a photo and call it diversity, that's not really like diversity. That's just showing you, hey, you know, I'm here to accept everybody, which is great, but there's a lot more action or actionable movement that happens with advocacy more than it does just saying we are diverse. Because every single person is diverse. You know, every single person on this screen right now and people that aren't on this screen, there's 17 people in this room. If every single one of us was alike, that would be really freaking boring, right? And so kind of taking this diversity aspect and flipping it on its head and saying United Cerebral Palsy is really focused on true advocacy. I think that's really where you're going to create more movement and actual change than just saying we are diverse. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. Yeah.
I hope I don't offend any. I can be a very big personality, so I'm sorry.
I don't think you're offending anybody. No, actually, you're really opening up our thoughts and our minds here. Any other questions for Steph? We still have a few minutes.
Sure, Steph, it's Kelly.
Hey.
I'm not going to say you inspire me, but it was great, and I was glad to hear you. A couple things. When you talk about, you know, the amount of classes that you're doing on a weekly, do you have a limit of how many you're going to do? How many more? I know you have some coaches.
Yeah.
But what is your capacity as, you know, having a relatively small team?
Yeah.
Capacity for more individuals. And I mean, the corporations you're dealing with, is it like ERGs, BRGs, employee assistance programs? Is that where you're going in under the corporate side?
No, so you meaning like budget wise, are you
No,
saying?
no, we have, I work for a company, an insurance company, and we have groups called BRGs, which are they're employee programs. So they
Oh.
bring in people that do exercise or there's someone that comes in and does yoga, and they do it all via Zoom.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious where you're going into when you go to these corporations. Who's reaching out? Is it an HR or is it an employee assistance program?
No, it's actually I don't
And
even,
employee assistance programs are all paid. They're not volunteer.
yeah. Honestly, it's just been direct communication with like even somebody like Armando, right? So like the head of the organization, president, CEO, or director will reach out to me and say, we're very interested. What does this look like? Now, when it comes to capacity, you are so right in the sense of asking that question. My ultimate goal is to grow the organization enough in the sense of coaching wise, so that I'm not necessarily coaching, I would say, 20 classes or so a week. And I'm getting to that point. I'm constantly trying to bring newer people in. And our corporate memberships, I would probably handle about 3 more corporate memberships of like an umbrella organization. So like Armando and I have talked about this. I know there are tons of UCP affiliates, right? And let's say you guys are super interested in getting a corporate membership, which I would adore, but you would do it as an umbrella. So United Cerebral Palsy as a whole could get a corporate membership. But then here's the other cool thing that happens. Staying driven individually costs $20 a month. So if you, Kelly, wanted to take my class and Todd wanted to take my class, you would pay $20 a month. So here's what happens. People take the corporate membership classes and they still do it, but I only offer corporate memberships once or twice a week. So you have an option for once a week, you have an option for twice a week, and that's per month, right? And again, Armando and I have had this discussion before, so if you guys are interested, you guys can talk to him about that side of things. But so once or twice a week. So let's say you fall in love with doing the UCP classes and you want to keep coming 3, 4, 5 times a week. You buy yourself a Staying Driven membership. We wanted to keep Staying Driven very cost effective because $20 can be a lot of money for some people, but $20 is also not a lot of money for some people, right? And so we wanted to try to keep it as cost effective as possible. And so the reality is our corporate memberships are what really like pad the business, because right now I have about 62 individual memberships. And if I didn't have the corporate memberships, I would have to raise that individual membership quite a lot to be able to kind of counterbalance where I'm at. When I was coaching in Hammer Driven and I had my own gym, people would pay me $135 a month just for an individual membership. And they could come unlimited amount. So some people are coming to the corporate memberships, they do class once or twice a week, they fall in love with it, and then they buy themselves an individual membership and they stay. And so I would say we've had a little bit of attrition, but not too much. I've had people from day one to now, and I've had people for the last 2 years to now. So it kind of goes up and down, but when it comes to the organizations as a whole, we would find a time that works best for your organization. So if Tuesday nights at 4 p.m. Eastern time is best for everybody, I would adjust it to my schedule. You know what I'm saying? So we sit down, we evaluate our schedule. I don't coach all of the corporate membership classes because it would just be too much. but I try to be as hands-on as possible. Does that make sense?
Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one. Hi, Steph. My name is Leslin, and I'm from Michigan. I just love your message and your energy. Do you have time to do any public speaking?
Yeah, I do. I'm actually tomorrow, I'm going to be the keynote speaker at a women's empowerment event for the city of Chandler, Arizona tomorrow. And I also do public speaking, but also consultancy. And I think I'm just going to take a minute because I think you guys would appreciate this experience. I did a speaking engagement for the city of Chandler about a week and a half ago. And one of their things was this was diversity, inclusion, organization, like the part of the city. And they have these really big meetings for making decisions about people with disabilities for the city. And this one woman raised her hand and she said, Steph, I love what you do. She said, could you possibly tell me like what we could be doing better? I asked them two questions. I said, can anybody in this room tell me when the ADA was enacted? And people were like 1960 something, 1970, 1980. And I'm like, nope. And I told them when the ADA was enacted, July 26th of 1990. I have lived 6 months of my entire life without coverage of the ADA. So then I asked them, how many people sit on your board making these really important decisions for the city? How many people have disabilities that are helping you make these decisions? And they said, not one single person. Not one single person have they had with a physical disability or elsewhere coming into these meetings having a conversation. And that really like sparked my conversation because my answer to them was, that's where you start, right? And so if my experience, and I have a master's degree in higher education, student affairs, but I have life experience of what it is to be around the ADA and having to adapt. And so if my experience can help your organization even level up just a little bit for accessibility, that's what I love to do. So yes, I do speaking engagements, but I also do consultancy as well.
Thank you. I'll be reaching out.
We have a minute. Any other comments or questions for Steph? I will let you know that we are in a conversation.
I think we have one, Armando.
Sorry, Armando. Yeah, I do have a question.
Yeah.
So Steph, very nice to meet you. My name is Michael Lugardo. I work for the national office. I do their fundraising, I do the development, and I'm very interested in kind of learning more about what a workout session or CrossFit section even looks like. Or CrossFit workout will even look like. And I think if you can either share maybe a video or some type of any information so that visually I can kind of get an understanding of how many people join your Zoom sessions and whatnot, that would be very, very interesting, and understanding sort of your strategy and your just understanding how your teaching practices go.
So what I'll do is if you send me an email, Armando has my email, we can correspond and I will have you come as a guest to one of my classes whenever works best for you. This can go for anybody. If you guys, I can send Armando an open invitation. If you guys want to send me an email, the only thing that I ask is that you don't share the Zoom link with anybody else because my members pay for it. Right. So anytime that I have somebody coming in as a guest, I just ask as good faith that you please, and if you enjoy it and you want to come to class, then you pay a membership. But just in good faith to be able to keep the code for yourself or for just for learning purposes as well. But I would highly encourage you to take the class and be part of the class. We do have some able-bodied people that are on the classes as well. So I can definitely do that. I will send Armando or just he'll give you my email and then we go individually from point A to point B.
Steph,
Thank
where can our affiliates actually get your book? Is it?
You guys can go on Amazon. It's called Driven by Steph the Hammer. My maiden name was Hammerman, so that's kind of where the hammer came from. I told my husband Steph the Roach doesn't sound the same, so professionally we stick with Steph the Hammer. If any of you are on social media, all of my social media handles are Steph the Hammer. And if you guys want to check out the website and what we do, it's called stayingdrivenlive.com.
Great, Steph. I just also wanted to share that you and I are in conversation about what it may look like for us to do like a corporate package for the affiliates, so that the affiliates can actually benefit from your trainings and really their families that they serve, right?
Yeah,
So,
and I want to just really quickly, John from Hawaii, because I know there's a couple Johns. John, I was hearing you talk about surfing for the adaptive community. If you ever want to look at a really cool organization, I went surfing with Operation Surf, and that could be a good connection as well. So
Thank you.
I've never been to Hawaii, but maybe one day I'll have an excuse to come. Yeah,
I'm just getting on your Instagram right now.
there you go.
great. So I'll work. We're certainly going to share this this video here, or actually a copy of this recording to the affiliates, and James and I will find a way so we can get some either some interest, and then Steph and I will work on putting a package together, and there could be some support out there, I believe. Steph, I'm really honored that first of all, I had a chance to meet you in person. And I got to meet your husband too. So yes, it was my first thought that he's an incredible guy, because he's just a nice guy, right? And he likes cars and I like cars. And so those were some very cool things. But in addition to that, congratulations on your Roy Campanella Award that you're going to be receiving in New York, and everything that you've done, your book. I was just about to say that you're an inspiration, but I'm not going to do that. So
I'll leave you with one last thing. Remember this, okay?
Please.
It's okay to say inspiration. Inspiration is the spark, but motivation is the fire. You have to be able to do something with that inspiration, or else it's just going to be an empty compliment. So inspiration is the spark, motivation is your fire.
Great. Thank you, Steph, again. And I will circle back with you, and all of you that joined us today. I really appreciate your time